The first thing I saw when I left St. Catherine's Hospital was my own front porch on a security alert. Two men in work boots were carrying a new deadbolt toward the door I had walked through that morning. My brother Connor stood beside them with his hands in his pockets, smiling like he had finally won something. Then my mother stepped into frame and said, "Make sure her key doesn't work when she comes back." My name is Maren Holt. I was 34 years old, worked as a medical records coordinator in Minneapolis, and had spent the last 6 years living with and caring for my grandmother Evelyn. That house had been hers long before any of us were born. It was the place where I learned to make coffee, where I slept on the living room couch during high school after my parents' divorce, where Grandma hid birthday cards in kitchen drawers because she always forgot where she put them. That afternoon, Grandma was in a hospital bed after a bad fall in her kitchen. Her hip was fractured, her blood pressure had been unstable. She had looked smaller than I had ever seen her, wrapped in a pale blanket with an oxygen tube under her nose, asking me every 10 minutes whether the porch light had been left on. I told her yes, because I didn't want her worrying about a house she might not return to for weeks. I didn't know my family had already decided I wasn't supposed to return either. The alert lasted 19 seconds. 19 seconds of Connor pointing at the front door. 19 seconds of my mother Diane telling the locksmith, "The old key won't be valid." 19 seconds of my stepfather Rick dragging a cardboard box from the hallway toward his truck. The box had my name written on the side in black marker. Marlon's office. He had even spelled my name wrong. I stood in the hospital parking lot with my overnight bag hanging from one shoulder and my coffee going cold in my hand. For a second I honestly thought I had misunderstood. Families argued. Families said cruel things. My family had made an art form out of calling me selfish whenever I disagreed with them. But changing the locks while I was sitting beside my grandmother's hospital bed was something colder. It was not an argument. It was an eviction. My phone started ringing before I could call anyone. Connor's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Maren," he said, sounding annoyed instead of nervous. "Where are you?" "At the hospital. With Grandma. Where I've been for the last 12 hours. There was a pause. I could hear wind on his end, and the dull thud of something heavy being loaded into a vehicle. "Mom said you were probably coming back tonight." "I am coming back tonight." "No," he said, "you're not." It was strange how calm his voice was. Not angry, not embarrassed, just settled, like he had been practicing the sentence. I looked again at the video alert. The locksmith had already removed the old lock. The front door, the blue one Grandma painted herself 15 years ago, stood open behind them. My mother was inside. She was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, looking toward my bedroom. "What do you mean I'm not?" I asked. Connor exhaled hard. "You've made this whole thing difficult enough. Grandma needs professional care now. You can't keep pretending you're the only person who loves her." "I never said I was." "You act like it." I closed my eyes. Behind me, an ambulance backed into the emergency entrance, lights flashing against the wet pavement. For 6 years, Connor had come to the house for holidays, birthdays, and the occasional Sunday dinner. He never came when Grandma's arthritis swelled so badly she couldn't button her blouse. He never came when her furnace failed in January. He never came when she forgot the stove was on and cried because she thought she was losing her mind. But he had come when there was something to take. "Connor," I said quietly, "you changed the locks on Grandma's house." "It isn't your house." "No, it's Grandma's." "That's exactly the point." He said it with that old polished tone he used whenever he wanted to sound reasonable. The tone that made people think he was the responsible one. The son who worked in finance. The husband with the new SUV. The man who could speak about family values while letting someone else carry the actual weight of them. I had heard it my whole life. When we were children, Connor broke things, and I got blamed for being too sensitive. When he dropped out of college, my mother used Grandma's savings to help him restart. When he got married, Grandma gave him the diamond watch Grandpa had promised me because, according to my mother, Connor needs something to feel proud of. Every loss I had was always explained as sacrifice. Family sacrifice. Fairness. Gratitude. I had learned those words could be used like locks. "Mom and Rick are taking care of things," Connor continued. "They think you need to stay somewhere else for a while." "Where?" "That's not my problem." For a moment I said nothing. I watched the video again. My mother crossed through the hallway carrying a framed photograph from the shelf near the stairs. It was the picture of Grandma and me at my college graduation. Grandma's hand was raised in the air, waving like she had just won an election. My mother put the picture into a box. Something in my chest went still. "Tell Mom I'm coming home," I said. Connor gave a dry laugh. "You really don't get it, do you? This isn't your decision anymore." Then he hung up. I stood there until the phone screen went black. A nurse passing through the lot glanced at me, probably wondering why I looked like I had forgotten how to breathe. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to scream into the phone. I wanted to march back to the house and pound on the door until every neighbor heard what my family had done. Instead, I went back inside to Grandma's room. She was awake when I entered. The television was on low, but she wasn't watching it. She had her hands folded on top of the blanket, her fingers thin and bent from arthritis. The moment she saw my face, she knew something had happened. "Did Diane call?" she asked. I sat down beside the bed. "Not exactly." Grandma's eyes moved toward the door. Even at 83, after a fall and a long day of pain medication, she still had that sharpness in her. She had spent 40 years running a small neighborhood bakery with Grandpa. She could tell when flour had been stretched with cheap filler just by looking at the bread. She could tell when a customer was lying before they finished their sentence. "What did they do?" she asked. I tried to make my voice steady. "They changed the locks." For a second she didn't react. Then her mouth tightened. Not with surprise, with recognition. "They finally did it," she whispered. I stared at her. "You knew." Grandma looked down at the blanket. "I knew they were talking." "Talking about what?" She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Connor has been asking about the house for months. Diane says he and Lauren are having money problems. He says the mortgage on their new place is too much. Rick keeps telling me this house is too big for one old woman." "You aren't one old woman. You live with me." "That is not how they see it." My throat burned. "Did they tell you they were doing this today?" "No." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes filled with something worse than tears. "Shame. Because I thought I could handle my own children." That sentence hurt more than Connor's call. Grandma had always been strong in ways no one gave her credit for. After Grandpa died, she kept the bakery going for 2 years before she sold it. She paid off the house early. She never asked anyone for money. She raised my mother alone for a time while Grandpa worked nights. But strength does not protect you from people who know exactly where you are soft. And my mother had always known how to make Grandma feel guilty for surviving longer than everyone expected. "They said I need assisted living," Grandma continued. "They said you can't keep putting your life on hold. They said the house should be sold before it becomes a burden." "You are not a burden. Maren. You are not." The words came out harder than I meant them to. Grandma squeezed my hand once, then looked away. In that hospital room, I understood something I had spent years trying not to see. My family did not want Grandma cared for. They wanted her moved, managed, reduced to paperwork. They wanted the house emptied while she was too hurt to fight them, and while I was too busy keeping her alive to notice what they were taking. But they had made one mistake. They forgot Grandma had never trusted Connor around anything valuable. 3 years earlier, after someone stole packages from the porch, I had installed a small security system for her. A doorbell camera. 2 outdoor cameras. One pointed at the driveway, one at the back gate. Grandma had laughed at first, saying she felt like a woman in a spy movie. Then she started checking the footage every morning with her coffee. She especially liked the front camera. "It sees everything," she used to say. "People act different when they think no one's looking." I opened the app again. There were not just 1 or 2 alerts. There were 14. The locksmith arriving, Rick carrying boxes, Connor opening the garage, my mother entering the house with a folder under her arm, a delivery truck stopping near the curb, Connor and Rick standing in the driveway after the others had gone inside. I pressed play on the longest recording. The screen showed the front porch from the camera's familiar angle. The view was grainy because dusk had started settling over the neighborhood. Connor stood near the railing. Rick was beside him holding a thick envelope. My mother came through the front door and shut it behind her. "Did you find the paperwork?" Connor asked. My mother lifted the folder. Rick nodded toward the street. "And what if Maren comes back before we're done?" My mother looked directly toward the camera, though I knew she had forgotten it was there. "She won't," she said. Then Connor said something that made my entire body go cold. She'll come back anyway. She always does. I watched the next 60 seconds of footage in the hospital room, with Grandma's hand still wrapped around mine. Connor leaned against the porch railing like he was discussing a renovation project. Rick held the envelope under one arm. My mother looked tired, almost wounded, which was how she looked whenever she was about to do something cruel and wanted credit for suffering through it. She'll come back anyway, Connor said. She always does. My mother glanced toward the driveway. Then we make it clear she can't stay. She's not on the deed. She's not family in any legal sense that matters. I felt Grandma's fingers tighten around mine. Rick asked, "What about Evelyn?" My mother's voice dropped. "The rehab center will keep her for a while. By then Connor can list the house. We just need Mom to sign the transfer papers before Maren gets in her head." There was a long silence in the room after the recording ended. The hospital monitor kept chirping beside Grandma's bed. Someone rolled a cart down the hallway. Life continued with its ordinary sounds, which felt almost insulting. My entire family had just been caught planning to remove me from the only home I had known as an adult, and the ice machine outside the room still hummed like nothing had happened. Grandma stared at the phone in my hand. "Diane said she wanted to help Connor refinance," she whispered. "She said the house would stay in the family by putting it in Connor's name. She said he would take care of me." The pain in Grandma's voice was not only about the house. It was about realizing her own daughter had been speaking to her, as if she were already gone. My mother had spent years calling Grandma Mom in public, and Evelyn whenever money came up. I had noticed it before. I had never understood how much it meant. I leaned closer to the bed. "Did you sign anything?" Grandma looked frightened for the first time that day. "Connor brought papers over 2 weeks ago. He said they were for the insurance company. He said they would make it easier for you to handle my appointments if something happened." "What did the papers say?" "I don't know." He rushed me. My chest tightened. I knew exactly how Connor worked. He did not forge signatures in dark alleys or talk like a criminal. He used urgency. He used confidence. He held a pen out and said things like, "We need this done today," until people signed, just to make him stop looking disappointed. "Do you remember where the papers are?" I asked. Grandma shook her head slowly. "Connor took them with him." That night I did not sleep. The hospital offered me a reclining chair in Grandma's room, but I spent most of the hours sitting near the window with my laptop open, saving every camera clip to 3 separate places. I downloaded the porch footage, the driveway footage, the back gate footage. I saved each file under the date and exact time, then I forwarded copies to an email account Connor and my mother did not know existed. My job had trained me to respect records. I knew what details mattered. Times, dates, metadata, original files. I knew that people could deny words, but they had a harder time denying a clock in the corner of a video. At 2:14 inches the morning, I found the footage that made my hands shake. The back camera had caught Connor and Rick loading Grandma's locked fireproof box into Rick's truck. I recognized it immediately. It had always sat in the bottom of Grandma's bedroom closet, behind a row of winter blankets. Inside were the practical pieces of her life, her passport, old tax returns, the title to her Buick property records, and a thick file she called the papers that make people behave. Connor had a key. Not Grandma's key. The duplicate she kept in a yellow mug above the refrigerator. The next morning my mother walked into the hospital room carrying white flowers and wearing the soft gray sweater she used whenever she wanted to appear fragile. Connor followed behind her with a coffee in one hand and an expression that said he had rehearsed everything in the car. Grandma's face changed the second she saw them. My mother bent down beside the bed. "Mom, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" Grandma looked at her for a long moment. "Where is my fireproof box?" My mother froze. Connor set the coffee down too quickly. "Grandma, this isn't the time." "It is exactly the time." The room felt smaller. I stayed in my chair near the window and said nothing. I wanted them to keep talking. People like Connor only became careful when they believed someone could stop them. At that moment he thought I was tired, homeless, and cornered. My mother's smile trembled at the edges. "We moved some things for safekeeping. The house isn't secure right now." "The house isn't secure because you changed the locks," I said. Connor looked at me. "We changed the locks because the house needs to be protected." "From who?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "From chaos." That was his favorite word for me, chaos. He used it whenever I was the person standing between him and something he wanted. When I questioned why he borrowed money from Grandma without paying it back, I was chaotic. When I asked why my mother had used Grandma's savings to cover Connor's wedding debt, I was chaotic. When I refused to pretend everything was fine at Christmas, I was chaotic. My mother sat on the edge of the visitor chair and folded her hands. Maren, you need to stop making this harder. Your grandmother needs care. You need space. The house needs to be sold before it becomes a financial problem. It is paid off, I said. Maintenance costs money. Connor's new house costs money too. That does not make Grandma's house his. Connor's face darkened. You don't know anything about our finances. I know enough to know you were discussing refinancing on the porch while you carried her records into Rick's truck. The silence that followed was immediate and clean. My mother turned toward me slowly. What did you just say? I opened my phone and placed it on the tray table beside Grandma's bed. You should be more careful around cameras. Connor's eyes moved to the screen. For the first time since I had known him, I watched confidence leave his face, without being replaced by anger. He looked not guilty exactly. He looked inconvenienced, like a man who had discovered a leak in a plan he thought was sealed. Rick stood by the door, silent as always. He had never needed to say much. My mother spoke for him. Connor pushed for him. Rick carried boxes and drove trucks and called it staying out of family business. My mother picked up her purse. You are twisting this. No, Grandma said. Her voice was weak, but every person in the room heard it. My mother looked at her. Mom, please. No, Grandma repeated. You are twisting it. Connor stepped closer to the bed. Grandma, nobody is trying to hurt you. We are trying to make sure everything is handled responsibly. Grandma looked at him with an exhaustion I had never seen before. You mean handled by you? He did not answer. A nurse entered, then carrying medication and a clipboard. She paused when she saw the tension in the room, but Grandma lifted her chin and said, Please ask them to leave. My mother's face went pale. Mom, she whispered. Leave. The nurse stepped forward calmly. I'm sorry, but the patient has asked for privacy. Connor looked at me with a kind of quiet hatred I had felt from him before, usually in smaller moments. When I was 12 and refused to lie about him breaking Grandpa's fishing rod. When I was 19 and told Grandma not to co-sign Connor's first car loan. When I was 27 and stopped answering his calls after he borrowed $500 and called me greedy for asking when he would repay it. This was different. This time he knew I had something he could not talk his way around. After they left, Grandma slept for nearly 3 hours. I sat beside her and stared at the flowers my mother had brought. White lilies. Grandma hated lilies. She always said they smelled like funerals. My mother knew that. It was such a small thing, but it told me everything. My mother had not come to comfort her. She had come to perform concern. Around noon, a hospital social worker named Elena came by to discuss Grandma's discharge planning. She was in her late 50s with silver hair and a warm but direct voice. She asked who would be supporting Grandma after surgery and rehabilitation. Before I could answer, Grandma opened her eyes and said, My granddaughter, Maren. Elena smiled at me. And is that the plan you both want? Yes, I said. Grandma nodded. Then Elena asked whether there were any family conflicts we should document before discharge. I looked at Grandma. She looked back at me. We did not need a long conversation. We both knew the time for protecting everyone else's comfort had ended. Yes, I said quietly. There are. I told Elena only what mattered. That my family had changed the locks on Grandma's house while I was at the hospital. That important personal documents had been removed without Grandma's consent. That someone might pressure Grandma into signing property papers while she was recovering. I did not raise my voice. I did not call anyone names. I gave dates, times, and facts. Elena wrote everything down. Then she said something that changed the shape of the day. Before anyone discusses a discharge plan, we can request a patient advocate and note that Miss Holt does not consent to financial or housing decisions being made without independent review. Grandma looked at me. A small spark returned to her eyes. Do that, she said. By late afternoon, Connor began calling again. I ignored the first 3 calls. On the 4th, he left a voicemail. Maren, you're making a mistake. Mom is upset. Grandma is upset. You're turning a difficult situation into a legal war because you always need to be the victim. Just think about what you're doing to this family. I listened to it twice. Then I saved it. The next voicemail came from my mother. Her voice was softer. You don't understand the pressure Connor is under, she said. He has responsibilities. He has a family. He has bills. We all have to make sacrifices. I saved that one too. It was almost impressive the way they could speak about sacrifice without ever naming the person expected to make it. They did not say Connor made a mistake. They said Connor has pressure. They did not say, we took your home. They said, the family needs sacrifice. The words had changed, but the message had not. You will lose something so Connor does not have to. That evening, I drove to the house for the first time since the locks had been changed. I parked across the street under the maple tree where Grandpa used to hang Christmas lights. The porch light was off. The blue front door looked the same from a distance, but the brass deadbolt above the handle gleamed under the street lamp, new and bright and cruel. I did not walk up to the door. I sat in my car and opened the security app. The cameras were still running. At 8:42 p.m., the front door opened. Connor stepped outside with a thick folder in his hand. My mother followed him. She was holding a glass of wine. They stood on the porch, unaware that the small black camera above them had watched every lie they told for years. Connor opened the folder. I found the original estate file, he said. My mother took a drink. Does it say what we need it to say? Connor smiled. It says Maren has more rights here than we thought. I watched the recording 3 times before I moved. Connor's voice stayed in my head long after the screen went dark. Maren has more rights here than we thought. He did not sound worried about Grandma. He did not sound ashamed about changing the locks. He sounded irritated, like I was a clause buried in a contract that had ruined his plan. My mother lowered her wineglass and said, "What kind of rights?" Connor flipped through the folder. Not ownership, not yet. But there's a recorded beneficiary deed. Grandma signed it years ago. My breath caught. Rick asked, "What does that mean?" Connor looked toward the house. It means if Grandma dies with this still in place, the house goes to Maren. Not Mom, not me, Maren. I sat alone in my car across the street, staring at the blue front door that had suddenly become more than a door. It was the line between who they believed I was and what Grandma had quietly prepared for me to become. For years they had treated me like unpaid help, the extra daughter, the one who stayed because no one else would. But Grandma had seen something they had not. My mother's voice on the recording became sharp. She never told me. She probably didn't trust you, Connor said. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Rick asked, "Can she change it?" Connor nodded. "As long as she's competent. But she's in the hospital on pain medication, and Maren is already filling her head with this camera nonsense." My mother's answer came so quickly it sounded rehearsed. "Then we need to get there first." I did not drive to a motel. I did not sleep in my car. I drove to the 24-hour diner near the hospital, ordered coffee I did not drink, and opened my laptop beneath the yellow light of a corner booth. I backed up every video file again. I wrote down the exact words. I listed the timestamps. I saved Connor's voicemail, my mother's voicemail, and every alert from the security app. Then I searched the Hennepin County property records. It took less than 10 minutes to find what Connor had found. On a page most people would have passed over, there was a recorded transfer on death deed, dated 4 years earlier. Evelyn Holt, grantor. Maren Holt, beneficiary. The address was Grandma's house. The filing number was real. The signature was Grandma's. So was the notarization. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. 4 years earlier I had been 29. Connor had just lost his job at a financial firm and asked Grandma for money to hold him over. My mother had called it a temporary emergency. Rick had called it family support. Grandma had sold some of Grandpa's old tools and emptied a savings account she had promised herself she would keep untouched. Connor never paid it back. Maybe that was the moment Grandma made her decision. The next morning I asked Elena, the hospital social worker, whether she knew an elder law clinic that handled financial coercion and housing concerns. She did not hesitate. She gave me a card for a small legal aid office downtown and told me to call before 10 when the intake line became busy. The attorney who called me back was named Priya Shah. Her voice was calm, precise, and impossible to rush. I told her only the facts. Grandma had been hospitalized after a fall. My family changed the locks on her house while I was at the hospital. They removed personal papers. They were discussing property transfers. I had security footage. A county record showed I was the named beneficiary on a transfer on death deed. Priya was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "First, your grandmother is alive and the property remains hers. Nobody can legally sell it without her authority. Second, if you have been living there with her permission, changing the locks may be an unlawful exclusion, regardless of whose name is on the deed. Third, do not hand over your original files, do not sign anything, and do not meet them alone." Her words did not make me feel triumphant. They made me feel less crazy. For years, my family had survived by making me doubt the shape of what was happening. They would do something wrong, then call me dramatic for naming it. They would take something from me, then accuse me of being selfish for wanting it back. Hearing a stranger say that the locks mattered, the footage mattered, and Grandma's consent mattered, felt like someone finally opened a window in a room I had been trapped inside. Priya asked whether Grandma had the capacity to explain what she wanted. "I think so," I said. "She's tired, she's in pain, but she knows exactly what they've been doing." "Then her wishes need to be documented independently," Priya said. "Not through family, through someone who works for her." That afternoon, Grandma was stronger. The medication had been adjusted and her speech was clearer. Elena arranged for a patient advocate to sit with us, while Grandma spoke privately about her home, her finances, and who she trusted to make decisions if she could not make them herself. My mother called twice while we waited. I did not answer. When the patient advocate arrived, Grandma looked nervous. She kept smoothing the edge of her blanket with one hand, but when the advocate asked her who she wanted involved in her discharge plan, she said my name without hesitation. When she was asked whether she wanted Connor or Diane making housing decisions for her, she looked toward the window. "No," she said. The advocate waited. Grandma turned back slowly. "My daughter thinks being related to me gives her permission to decide what happens to me. It does not." I had to look down because my eyes filled too fast. Then the advocate asked about the house. Grandma swallowed. "That house belongs to me. Maren lives there because I asked her to. She has cared for me. She has paid bills when I forgot. She has kept me from being alone. I do not want anyone selling it. I do not want anyone moving her things. I do not want Connor taking my papers." Every sentence was recorded in her chart. Not as revenge. As fact. After the advocate left, Grandma asked me to pull the chair closer. "There is something I should have told you," she said. I held her hand. "You don't have to explain the deed." "Yes, I do." Her voice had that old bakery owner firmness in it. The one that meant she had decided something difficult and did not want anyone rescuing her from it. "Your grandfather and I made plans after Connor started asking for money," she said. "We knew Diane would always choose peace over truth. We knew Connor would call anything he wanted a family need. We worried they would make you feel like you had no place to stand." I said nothing. Grandma looked ashamed. "I should have protected you sooner." The words broke something loose in me. Not loudly. I did not sob. I did not make the moment about myself. But I felt the grief of every year I had spent trying to earn a place in a family that had already assigned me the role of sacrifice. "You did protect me," I said. "No," she whispered. "I prepared to." She told me that she and Grandpa had met with an estate planner years ago, long before he died. After Connor's first major debt crisis, she updated the plan. The transfer on death deed was only one piece. There was also a caregiving agreement signed when I moved in, stating that I had the right to live in the house while caring for her, and could not be removed without formal notice and her direct written instruction. "Your mother said it was insulting," Grandma said. "She said families should not need paperwork." "Families who behave well usually don't fear paperwork," I said. Grandma smiled faintly. Then she gave me the information I had been missing. The original estate folder Connor had taken was not the only copy. Grandpa had kept duplicates in a safe deposit box at the credit union where he used to bank. Grandma had never told anyone except her attorney. She had assumed she would need it someday. She had been right. By the end of that day, Priya had obtained the recorded property documents, the caregiving agreement, and a written statement from Grandma confirming that no one had permission to remove belongings, change locks, or negotiate the sale of her home. Priya did not promise miracles. She did not call Connor a criminal. She simply sent a formal notice to my mother, Rick, and Connor. It stated that all property-related decisions required Grandma's direct consent. It stated that my occupancy rights were being asserted. It demanded the immediate return of Grandma's fireproof box and all documents removed from the home. It also warned them to preserve any records connected to attempted transfers, listings, loans, or sales. I thought the letter would make them back off. Instead, it made them angry. Connor called me that evening from a number I did not recognize. I answered because I wanted to hear how he would explain himself now. "You involved a lawyer?" he asked. "I involved someone who understands consent. You are trying to destroy this family." "No. I'm trying to stop you from selling Grandma's house while she's in a hospital bed." He laughed, once bitter and sharp. "You think you're some kind of hero because you changed her sheets and drove her to appointments." "No," I said. "I think I'm the person who was there." The silence on the line was thick. Then he said, "You don't get to hold that over us." "I'm not holding it over you. You're the one trying to take a house because you weren't there." Connor's voice lowered. "You don't understand what's at stake." "Then explain it." He did not. Instead, he said the sentence that finally made me stop, hoping he could be reached. "Mom and I have done more for this family than you ever will. You were always just the one with time." I ended the call. The next day, my mother sent me a message asking for a family meeting at the house. She wrote that she wanted to clear up misunderstandings. She said Grandma would be upset if we turned this into a battle. She said Connor's situation was more complicated than I knew. Then she added, "Please come alone. We need to talk like adults." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Priya. Her reply came back almost immediately. "Do not go alone. Do not sign anything. Keep your phone recording. If they return the documents, photograph everything before touching it." I did not tell my mother that I had legal help. I did not tell her Grandma's wishes had been documented. I did not tell her that the footage had been preserved in more than one place. I let her believe I was still standing outside the locked door with nowhere to go. Sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes it is the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday at 11 in the morning. By Friday night, Grandma had been transferred to a rehabilitation center. Her surgery had gone well. She was still fragile, but she was no longer alone in a hospital room where my family could walk in and speak around her as if she were furniture. I visited her before I went to the house. She was sitting in a chair by the window wearing a soft blue cardigan I had brought from her closet before the locks were changed. The same cardigan she wore every Thanksgiving, even when she complained it made her look old. "You don't have to go," she said. "Yes, I do. You can let the lawyer handle it." "I will. But I need them to see me walk through that door." Grandma looked at me for a long time. Then she reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out something small. It was the old brass house key. "I kept this in my purse," she said. "Connor never knew." I took it from her palm. The metal was warm from her hand. "That key may not open the door anymore," I said. Grandma gave me a tired smile. "It opens more than they think." At 10:45 the next morning, I parked across the street from the house. My mother's car was in the driveway. Rick's truck was beside it. Connor's SUV was parked near the curb. There was also a silver sedan I did not recognize. A real estate agent's car. On the front lawn, a small white sign leaned against the porch steps. It had not been planted yet, but I could read the name of the brokerage across the top. They were not planning to discuss a misunderstanding. They were planning to sell Grandma's life before she had even learned how to walk again. I slipped Grandma's old key into my coat pocket. My phone was recording. Priya was waiting 2 blocks away with copies of the notices and the county records. I crossed the street slowly, looking at the new lock they had installed to keep me out. Then I pressed the doorbell. Through the glass, I saw Connor's face change. Not because I had come back. Because this time I had not come back alone. Connor opened the door only halfway. He had changed out of the clothes he wore in the footage and put on a clean navy sweater, like he was hosting a polite conversation instead of trying to sell our grandmother's house behind her back. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. He looked at my coat, then at the street behind me, searching for the person I had mentioned without mentioning. "You brought someone?" he asked. "I brought the truth," I said. His jaw tightened. "Don't start with the performance." Behind him, I could see the dining room table. Grandma's old tablecloth had been removed. In its place were glossy listing packets, a measuring tape, and a laptop open to a real estate website. The silver-haired woman from the unfamiliar car stood near the window, holding a leather portfolio against her chest. My mother was beside her, smiling too brightly. "Maren," my mother said, "we were hoping you would come in and talk calmly." I stepped through the doorway. The new lock was still there. It clicked behind me, sharp and metallic. I looked at it for a moment, then at the blue front door Grandma had painted herself. The house smelled different, not like coffee and cinnamon and the lavender cleaner Grandma used on Sundays. It smelled like someone had opened every cabinet, moved every piece of furniture, and tried to make the place feel empty enough to sell. The real estate agent introduced herself as Dana. She spoke carefully, like someone who could already feel that she had walked into a room where the air had changed. "I was told Mrs. Holt was considering a possible future sale," she said. "She isn't," I replied. Connor gave a tired laugh. "You cannot speak for Grandma." "No," I said, "but Grandma can." My mother's face shifted. "What does that mean?" Before I answered, the front door opened again. Priya stepped inside, with a black folder under one arm and a smaller woman beside her, carrying a portable tablet. Connor stared at them, as if he had not fully believed I would bring anyone. Priya was not dramatic. She wore a charcoal coat, low heels, and the same calm expression she had used when she told me my family could not simply erase my place in the house because they were louder than I was. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Priya Shah. I represent Evelyn Holt." My mother stood up straighter. "Our mother does not need an attorney." Priya looked at her without changing expression. "Your mother retained counsel this morning." The room went quiet. Connor glanced at the real estate agent. Dana's fingers tightened around her portfolio. Rick came down the hallway from the kitchen, his face already red. He had always hated when people arrived with paperwork. Paperwork made it hard to hide behind tone. Priya placed the folder on the dining table. "Before anyone discusses a listing, a transfer, a loan, or any change in occupancy, there are several matters that need to be clarified." My mother folded her arms. "This is completely unnecessary." "No," Priya said. "It is overdue." She opened the folder and placed 3 documents on the table. The first was Grandma's written statement confirming that she had not authorized the locks to be changed, my belongings to be removed, or her house to be listed. The second was the caregiving agreement signed years earlier, giving me the right to live in the house while I cared for her. The third was the recorded transfer on death deed Connor had discovered the night before. He stared at it. My mother picked it up with shaking hands. She gave the house to Maren. "No," Priya said. "Mrs. Holt remains the sole owner while she is alive, but she made clear decisions about her future estate. Those decisions are legally recorded, and they do not support the plan you appear to have been discussing." Connor looked at me with a kind of disbelief that almost made me pity him. "Almost." "You knew," he said. "I didn't," I said. "Not until you found the folder." The real estate agent stepped closer to the table. "I'm sorry," Dana said carefully. "I was told the family had authorization and that Mrs. Holt's transition to assisted care was already agreed upon." "She is in rehabilitation after surgery," I said. "And she is very much alive." Dana's face changed. It was not outrage. It was professional alarm. Priya turned toward her. "You were provided incomplete information. Mrs. Holt has not consented to a listing. Any discussion of a sale is unauthorized." Dana closed her portfolio. "Then I will not be proceeding." Connor moved toward her. "Dana, wait. This is a family disagreement. Grandma wants what is best for everyone." Dana looked directly at him. "A family disagreement is one thing. A homeowner being hospitalized while relatives change locks and discuss selling her house without her present is another." Then she walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind her was quieter than I expected, but it landed like a verdict. My mother turned on me instantly. "You embarrassed us," she said. I looked around the dining room. Grandma's china cabinet stood against the wall. Her favorite yellow bowl was gone from the shelf. The framed graduation photo had been removed. On the table beside Connor's laptop was a stack of papers with his handwriting in the margins. "You changed the locks while I was beside Grandma in the hospital," I said. "You packed my things. You took her fireproof box. You invited a realtor here before she could stand without help. What exactly did you think would happen? My mother's eyes filled with tears. For years that would have undone me. My mother crying had always been the final stage of any argument. First she would deny. Then she would accuse. Then she would cry. And everyone would look at me as if I had injured her by refusing to accept what she had done. But I had watched the footage. I had heard her say, "She won't." So I did not rush to comfort her. "I was trying to protect this family," she said. "No," I said. "You were trying to protect Connor from the consequences of his choices." Connor slammed his hand against the table. "You don't know anything about my choices." Priya looked at him. "Then perhaps you should be careful not to make your financial situation the basis for an unauthorized property transaction." He went still. Rick glanced at Connor. My mother did too. The silence between them told me more than any confession could have. Priya continued, "We are aware of the mortgage pressure on Mr. Holt's home and the private debt connected to his business investment. We are not interested in publicly discussing those matters unless they become relevant to protecting Mrs. Holt's property." Connor's face drained of color. He looked at me, as if I had somehow betrayed him by learning the truth. "You looked into me," he said. "I looked into the reason you wanted to sell Grandma's house," I said. "There is a difference." My mother shook her head slowly. "Connor made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes." "Yes," I said. "But not everyone makes their grandmother pay for them." That was when Rick finally spoke. "This has gone far enough." Priya turned to him. "It has not." She lifted another document from the folder. It was a written demand for the return of the fireproof box and all property removed from the house. It included a list of items visible on camera, footage, files, framed photographs, Grandma's jewelry box, my work laptop, and several boxes taken from my room. "We have preserved video records showing the removal of these items," Priya said. "They must be returned today. Nothing is to be destroyed, withheld, or altered." Rick's shoulders dropped. He was the one who had carried the boxes. He was the one who had loaded the fireproof box into his truck. He had spent years pretending he was only the quiet man in the background. But quiet people still make choices. "The box is in the garage," he said. My mother turned toward him. "Rick." "It's in the garage," he repeated. "Everything is." Connor looked furious. "You cannot just hand it over." Priya's voice remained even. "It was never yours to hold." For a few minutes nobody moved. Then Rick walked toward the garage door. I heard it open. I heard cardboard scraping across concrete. When he returned, he carried the fireproof box with both hands. My grandmother's name was written on the front in faded label tape. He placed it on the dining table between the listing packets and Connor's laptop. It looked heavier than I remembered. Maybe because it contained more than paper now. It contained the proof that my family had been planning around Grandma's absence while she was still alive enough to say no. Priya photographed the box before anyone touched it. Then she opened it with the small key Grandma had kept in her purse. Inside were the property records, bank statements, old tax returns, and a sealed envelope addressed in Grandpa's handwriting. "For Evelyn, if they ever forget who this house belongs to." Grandma had told me about Grandpa's habit of labeling everything. He had labeled jars in the garage. He had labeled spare batteries. He had even labeled the remote controls, but seeing that envelope made my throat close. Priya looked at me. "Would you like to open it?" I nodded. Inside was a single letter written in blue ink. It was not legal, it was not dramatic, it was simply Grandpa's voice on paper. He wrote that the house was never meant to become a reward for whoever demanded the most. He wrote that Grandma had built half of it with her work at the bakery, her savings, and her stubbornness. He wrote that the person who showed up mattered more than the person who made the loudest claim. And he wrote one sentence that made my mother sit down. "Do not let guilt move what love built." Nobody spoke after that. Connor looked at the letter, then away. My mother covered her mouth. For the first time I saw something in her face that was not self-pity or anger. It was shame. Real shame. Not enough to fix what she had done. Not enough to erase the years. But enough that she could no longer pretend this was about fairness. It was about greed wearing a family name. Priya closed the fireproof box and slid it toward me. "Mrs. Holt has instructed that these documents remain secured with counsel," she said. She has also instructed that Maren Holt's belongings be restored immediately, that the locks be changed back, and that no one enter the house without her consent or Miss Holt's consent while she remains in rehabilitation. Connor laughed bitterly. So that's it, Maren gets the house now. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. This is Grandma's house, I said. It is not my prize. It is not Connor's bailout plan. It is not Mom's way to keep peace. It belongs to the woman who built a life here, and she gets to decide what happens to it. Then I looked at Connor. But you do not get to use her pain as collateral. He had no answer. My mother tried one last time. Maren, we are still family. I let the words sit between us. For most of my life that sentence had been a command. It meant forgive before anyone apologized. It meant give before anyone asked. It meant accept less because Connor needed more. It meant stay quiet so my mother did not have to feel guilty. But standing in Grandma's dining room with the fireproof box on the table and Grandpa's letter still warm in my hands, it meant something different. Family is not a permission slip, I said. You do not get to hurt someone and call it love because you share their blood. My mother started crying again. This time I did not feel cruel for not reaching for her. I felt free. Rick returned my boxes from the garage. Most of my things were still inside, though some had been dumped carelessly into plastic bins. My work files were bent. My sweaters smelled like motor oil. The graduation photograph was wrapped in an old towel, its frame cracked at one corner. I held it against my chest for a moment. Then I carried it upstairs. The lock on my bedroom door had not been changed. The room looked almost the same, except someone had opened every drawer and closet. My mother had not merely tried to remove me from the house, she had searched for something. Maybe she thought I had copies of documents. Maybe she thought I had money. Maybe she just wanted to prove that I had no private space she could not enter. I stood in the doorway and let myself feel it. Not rage. Grief. Because there is a particular kind of hurt that comes from learning the people who raised you never saw your boundaries as real. But grief does not always mean you are losing. Sometimes it means you are finally looking clearly at what has been gone for a long time. By the end of the afternoon, Priya had arranged for a locksmith to return the house to Grandma's control. The new deadbolt was removed. A new set of keys was made, one for Grandma, one for me, and one held in Priya's office until Grandma chose otherwise. My mother and Connor were not given keys. Connor stood in the driveway while the locksmith worked. He kept trying to talk. You're making a permanent decision over one bad week, he said. I placed the old brass key in my palm and looked at him. No. I'm making a clear decision after years of being told I should not notice what you did. You're really going to throw us away? I thought about that. Then I said, you threw me out while I was caring for Grandma in a hospital. The difference is that I am not throwing you away. I am simply not letting you back into places you have proven you will damage. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he got into his SUV and drove away. My mother left 10 minutes later. She stood on the porch for a long time before walking to her car. She did not ask for forgiveness. Maybe she knew she had not earned the right to ask yet. Maybe she finally understood that forgiveness was not a bill she could hand me and expect me to pay. When the house was quiet again, I opened every window. Cold spring air moved through the rooms. It carried the smell of wet earth and the first green leaves of the season. I put Grandma's yellow bowl back on the shelf. I set the graduation photo on the mantel, cracked frame and all. Then I made coffee in the old percolator, even though it was too late in the day, and even though Grandma would have scolded me for it. 2 weeks later, I brought her home. She came through the front door slowly with a walker and tears in her eyes. The porch light was on. The blue door had been polished. Her favorite blanket was folded over the back of her chair. I had placed the old brass key in a small dish by the entryway. Grandma looked at it and smiled. They thought a lock could decide who belonged here, she said. I took her hand. They were wrong. I used to believe strength meant enduring everything quietly. I thought being good meant making room for people who took too much. I thought family was something you had to keep saving even when it kept setting fire to your peace. Now I know better. Silence is not always surrender. Love is not always loyalty. And a boundary is not a wall built to punish people. Sometimes, it is simply the door you close after someone proves they will never stop trying to take your home.